let us get started here. Welcome, welcome. And if you're listening to this live, amazing. If you're listening to this as a recording, welcome. And I'm really excited to talk about this, what I'm now calling the authority revelation. And we're going to be talking about how to recognize the authority God has been forming through the life you've already lived. And so the most dangerous thing happening to women in midlife is not menopause. So that's quite a statement. And I want to just dive into this for a minute. And I want to ask you if you've been feeling restless lately, there is something inside you that won't leave you alone. You're not imagining it. And it's just not the discomforts of menopause. So maybe you found yourself wondering if this really is all there is, even though you're grateful for the life that God has given you. And that's something I think a lot of us struggle with sometimes is, excuse me, the wanting to feel gratitude, but also acknowledging that we're feeling a bit restless. So maybe you keep coming back to the same dream, the book you haven't written, the business you haven't started, or the business you don't feel that you've been successful with, the ministry possibly that you haven't stepped into, the leadership you've been quietly, quietly avoiding. You pray about it, you think about it, you tell yourself you'll start when you're clear, more confident, or even more qualified. Excuse me. But deep down, there's another fear you don't say aloud. What if God really is calling you and you're not faithfully stewarding what He's placed inside of you? And I want to suggest something that may completely change the way you see this season. What if you are not missing anything at all? What if God has been preparing you all along and today is the day that you begin to see it? Because I honestly don't believe that midlife is a crisis. It is a commissioning. Okay? And so while our bodies, our relationships, identities, priorities are changing, we are being bombarded with shiny objects. The next platform, the next algorithm, the next viral video that's supposed to finally be the thing that works. And every time we pick up our phones, it's a dopamine hit. Okay? Another course, another platform, another business model. Maybe it's affiliate marketing, maybe it's digital marketing. Maybe it's creating journals on selling them, creating journals on Canva. Another woman online telling us if we just post more consistently, if we fix our niche, grow our audience, or finally crack the algorithm, everything will fall into place. And meanwhile, we are exhausted. Our sleep is unpredictable already. Our cortisol is through the roof already. The weight that once came off easily will not move. The children may have left home or simply do not need us in the same way anymore, which can be emotionally crushing to our mother hearts. And because we are capable midlife women, we assume this is another problem we should be able to solve. So we push harder. We open another tab, save another reel, buy another planner, download another guide, and tell ourselves that Monday will be different. But Monday comes and we're still carrying the same quiet question. So if we've never met before we go any further, if we've never met, I want you to know why this message means so much to me. Because there was a season in my life when I knew I couldn't keep doing what I'd always done, but I also didn't know what I was supposed to do instead. But finally, it hit me hard. It wasn't looking for another strategy, it was looking for God's direction. And everything changed the day I made a decision, not to chase another strategy or to find another business model or to reinvent myself, although this is what I kept thinking I needed to do, but to simply follow God wherever He led. And that's when He completely shifted my perspective. He showed me that I wasn't supposed to go searching for the answer somewhere out there. The answer had already been written through the life that I have lived. And so what gives me the credibility to lead this conversation? I am a new Christian, but I've been in business for a really long time. Nearly 25 years online, building businesses, decades of leading women in different arenas in health, menopause, business strategy, online marketing, and network marketing. I've been a business mentor and a strategist for a good long time now. And I've created this authority framework concept through that experience and am now founding what I'm calling the authority room. And today I really want to lead women. I want to lead them and help them recognize and embrace and faithfully steward the authority God has formed through the life they've already lived. And I truly believe this is the answer to so many struggles that we are having as midlife women. So, what am I supposed to be doing with this part of my life? Not because we're ready to spend the next 20 years quietly playing golf, and that's okay. I love playing golf. We just know there's more in us. We want to create something meaningful. We want to make money. We want our work to matter. We want to use the wisdom, the experience, the expertise that we've spent decades earning. But underneath all that desire is a fear that most women do not say out loud. And that's the real pain. It's not a lack of ambition, it's a fear of moving into the final third of your life without knowing whether you're faithfully using what you've been given. Because the outside world keeps telling you a clear niche you need, a better strategy, more followers, a new brand, a viral reel, all of it. And let's face it, you may be dismissing these experiences that have really prepared you. And I often hear on social media people say, oh, all of these things that you quote, excuse me, weren't supposed to carry. And I truly believe that we were meant to carry. The years of raising children, the business you built, the teams you led, the heartbreak you survived, the health crises that changed you and made you stronger, the relationships that stretched you, and really the years you spent caring for everyone else. The reinventions, the disappointments, all of it, the successes too. And often when we think back, they just made no sense, especially at the time. Okay? So you may look at these things and see a collection of unrelated chapters, right? Things that have happened in your life experience, separate things, separate times, different times with different people. But I see evidence. I see evidence of wisdom, of resilience, discernment, authority. Evidence as God has been forming something in you long before you had language for it. So tonight I'm not going to give you another complicated blueprint to follow. I'm going to invite you to look at your life differently. And by the end of our time together today, my hope is that you will recognize the authority God has been developing in your life and already lived, the life you've already lived, to begin to understand how your experiences fit together so that you can identify one faithful step. So, not the entire plan for the next 20 years, one step, because I don't believe that midlife is where your significance begins to fade. I believe midlife is where everything you have lived begins asking to be stewarded. And midlife is not a crisis, it's a commissioning. And before I show you what that means, I need to show you how I almost missed my own. Okay? And so, about 18 months ago, my life felt like it was coming apart in ways I couldn't explain. From the outside, on social media probably looked fine. I'd spent 15 years building businesses online. I built teams, coached women, created digital products. I've taught branding, leadership, business, was successful in network marketing. I loved what I did. And again, I was successful at doing it. But inside, I suddenly felt completely flat. And part of it was the menopause situation. Some of you might be able to relate to that. It almost destroyed me. My body didn't feel like, my own anymore. I was exhausted. My confidence had taken a real hit. And at the same time, I couldn't work out where my business was supposed to go. Should I build around menopause? Because I'd lived it. I did that for a while and it was really, really good. Should I go back to business and branding? Because I'd had 15 years of experience there. I went backwards and forwards for months. And there was everything else in life at the same time was shifting, as it does when we're in midlife, right? My children were on the edge of leaving home. My relationship with my husband was hard. And I think a lot of women understand the pressure that comes when you're really just trying to figure things out and the future feels really uncertain. I had a very challenging relationship with my daughter, and it was absolutely soul destroying. And everywhere I looked, I felt like life was changing and not in a positive way. And I remember there was one place I found myself going almost every day, and that was the shower. Not because I wanted a shower, because it was the only place nobody needed anything from me. And nobody was asking me a question. Nobody expected me to have an answer. I could just stand there and cry. And I remember one morning at the gym feeling like I was going through the motions, and just thinking about how, everything that I was going through. And I kept having this thought, I don't know what to do anymore. Not because of one terrible thing or because of everything. And if I'm honest, all of the personal development I spent years immersed in, it just stopped helping me answering questions. It really did. And it was a bit disappointing. Things seemed a bit empty, like I just wasn't getting answers from things like manifestation, mindset tools, vision boards, positive thinking, all of it. And I'd spent most of my adult life believing that if I just changed my thinking or if I changed my vibe, aligned my energy, manifested hard enough, everything would work out. But none of it was reaching the place that I was really struggling and hurting. And I started to realize that I didn't need another mindset shift. I needed I needed truth. And so then something happened to me, and it was a turning point. And if you'd known me then, you never would have expected me to become a Christian. Like, I wouldn't have expected it. I was a staunch atheist, for a fierce atheist, for so long. And, I wasn't just somebody who didn't believe in God or the Bible or Jesus. I thought it was all BS. And it pains me to say that, but that's just the truth. And so this is my friend Natalie here, and she brought me to church. We developed a friendship over the years. And when we finally moved back to Canada and we moved to a little place called Chatham, she was the one who nudged me. Um, and this Christianity had just challenged me. I was so indifferent. I was almost angry about it. Because it challenged everything I built my like whole worldview on, my business, everything, manifestation, the quote universe, creating your own reality, all of that. Like even my healing, self confidence and all of that, I felt was all part of this idea that I could control it. And that's what I believed. And so the fact that I found myself having conversations with my friend Natalie about faith was very bizarre to me. And I remember we were driving somewhere together and she said something so simple to me. She looked at me and she said, Christine, it's not about religion. It's not about church, it's about having a relationship with Jesus. And I'll never forget that moment because something inside of me just fell. And I just can't explain it any better than that. It wasn't that every question disappeared, and it wasn't obviously that my circumstances suddenly changed. Certainly my menopause didn't just disappear. It didn't fix my marriage. At that time, I still didn't know what I was supposed to do in my business, but for the first time in a really long time, I felt hope. And so looking back now, I don't think I was looking for religion. I was looking to be rescued. And, because I'd spent so long talking about all of these things, the universe, manifestation, all of it. But who was the universe? You know, it couldn't know me, it couldn't love me, it couldn't comfort me, it couldn't carry me. Only Jesus could do that. And that's what I realized. And over the weeks and months that followed, he began changing the way I saw my entire life. It was absolutely mind blowing. And those of you who are, Christians or have gone through this, maybe you'll understand, what that feels like. And one of the first things that he impressed on my heart was something that I'd never considered before. He wasn't asking me to resent things that I'd carried. He was asking me to see it and to recognize it because he'd been using it. Hot damn. That stopped me because I'd been hearing so many messages telling women they'd been carrying things they were never meant to carry. Again, I see this on Instagram all of the time, sort of new age thinking. It's very negative in a lot of ways. That wasn't your thing. You weren't supposed to carry that. I don't know, maybe you've heard those messages too, but that we've carried our families. We have carried our families. We've carried our businesses. We've carried everyone's expectations. And now it's time to put all that down. Now I understand the heart behind that. And so that's something to discern around, is understanding that, God doesn't always give us light things. Jesus' journey certainly was not light. And so, but when I looked at scripture, I kept seeing something different. I saw women faithfully carrying responsibility. I saw them carrying families, businesses, carrying burdens. The Proverbs 31 woman is probably one of my favorite verses in the entire Bible. And it started to almost make me feel like I was being given permission to do these things. And so, what if carrying wasn't the mistake? Big question. What if God had been forming, through all of this? Because when I look back over my own life, I realized something. The years in network marketing hadn't just taught me how to build a team, they taught me how to lead. The years that I'd spent in, teaching online business hadn't just taught me strategy. They taught me how to communicate, how to encourage, how to build movements, how to see potential in women before they could see it in themselves. And the years navigating menopause and perimenopause hadn't just changed my body, they deepened my compassion. Motherhood, marriage, disappointment, success, failure, moving countries, every season had left something behind, not just memories. Formation, wisdom, authority, and I realized that I wasn't looking at a collection of unrelated things or unrelated chapters. I was looking at a lifetime of preparation. And that's when my question changed. I stopped asking, what business should I build? And I started asking, God, what have you been preparing me for through everything I've lived? And again, the question didn't give me an instant business plan, but it gave me something way more valuable. And that was a new way of seeing. I realized I wasn't starting over. I was standing on a foundation that God had been building for decades. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And so I started seeing women everywhere who believed they needed another strategy when what they really believed they needed was a different lens. So women who thought they needed to, quote, reinvent themselves when God was asking them to recognize the woman he'd already been forming. And that's when one sentence dropped into my heart that shaped everything that I have built. And I've said it a few times already. Midlife isn't a crisis, it's a commissioning. I kept rolling this over in my head, not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because there comes a season when God invites us to stop asking what's next and start asking, what have I been prepared for? Big difference. Because that question became the beginning of everything that I'm going to share with you. So, the midlife commissioning blueprint. So, the question became the beginning of what I now call this commissioning blueprint. Not because I think everyone has the same calling, of course not, but because I believe God prepares all of us in remarkably similar ways. So, when I began looking back over my own life, I realized there was a pattern. And once I saw it in myself, I started seeing it in other women everywhere. Women who spent decades doing all of these things that we're talking about, leading families, leading teams, walking through heartbreak, navigating loss, starting over, serving others, holding everything together. Women had a far more authority than they even realized, but they weren't seeing it because they were looking in all the wrong places, i.e., another certification, another strategy, another platform, all of it. Okay, so authority. I love that word. It's like my favorite word. Your authority isn't something you manufacture, it's something you recognize. God is informing it through your life you've already lived. It isn't something you manufacture. So I want you to notice something. Everything we've talked about so far has been leading to this one idea. For years, I believed, authority came from what I'd accomplished, my school, education, certificates, the businesses that I'd built, qualifications, results, right? How many clients, how much money. I thought if I could just become more experienced, more successful, more knowledgeable, know more things, know another platform, then one day I'd finally have something worth offering. But that's not what God was showing me. He showed me that my greatest authority wasn't found in my achievements, it was found in what He had faithfully formed in me. And that's a very, very different way of looking at our lives. Because if authority is something we manufacture, then we're always chasing more. You know what I'm talking about. Another certification, another strategy, another reason to feel qualified. Now, I'm not saying that getting certified in something is a bad thing, but I'm talking about that is not the root of your authority, right? And really, we have been looking in the wrong place all along. Okay. I don't believe women are lacking authority. I think they're just struggling to recognize it because what feels ordinary to you, right? Maybe you've gone through something very unique. And because you've gone through it and you know about it and you've experienced it, it feels ordinary. But that may be the very thing that God wants to use. You've lived your life one day at a time. You've walked through heartbreak one day at a time. You've raised children. You've built businesses one day at a time. You've cared for aging parents maybe one day at a time. You've navigated disappointment, uncertainty, change, loss one day at a time. And to you, again, it just feels like your life. But God sees something different. He sees formation, wisdom, discernment, compassion, resilience. Love that. He sees a woman who's been shaped through lives of faithful living. And of course, it's not because we've lived a perfect life or we've tried to, but He's been faithfully at work in it. And I think that's where so many women get stuck. They're waiting to become someone when God is inviting you to recognize who He's already been forming. So let's talk about what I actually mean. So if you got my email with the workbook, you will get a recording of this. And if you don't have the workbook, that's okay. You can just get out a piece of paper. But there is a companion guide that you've all been emailed. And so I want to do a quick exercise that I believe may help you change the way you see your life. And so, again, we often focus on what has happened to us, but today I want to focus on what God has been doing in you. So I want you to take a piece of paper. If you have the workbook, you probably don't have it printed out, but just grab a piece of paper. In the first column, write down the significant seasons of your life. And so this doesn't have to be something super dramatic, right? Seasons of joy, seasons of loss, maybe seasons where you felt like you were waiting. Obviously, motherhood. If you're a mom, your career, maybe you walked through illness or caring for others, rebuilding something, whatever comes to your mind. Okay, I want you to write that down. And then in the second column, I don't want you to write what happened. I want you to think about who you became or what God formed in you because of that. So, what did that season produce in you? So, did it deepen your faith? Did it build resilience? Did it teach you compassion? Maybe grow your wisdom, strengthen your courage, increase your patience? I don't want you to overthink it. I just want you to begin writing. Okay? So before you write anything else, I want you to look. Okay? I want you to read what, and if you might do this after, but I want you to read your page a little bit differently. Don't look at the events. I want you to look for the woman God has been forming. Okay? What qualities keep showing up? What patterns do you notice? And what has God been faithfully forming in you through every season? Most women think they're just completed an exercise about their past, right? But that's not what we've just done. You weren't uncovering random memories, you were uncovering evidence that God has been shaping you all along. And you've been remembering the events. God has been forming the woman, right? The wisdom you carry, the compassion you offer, the resilience that's forged in the hard seasons, and the faith that's been strengthened through this uncertainty. So these are the things that form the basis of your calling. And so maybe you're sitting here thinking, well, what does this have to do with my network marketing business? Okay, your brand is not your network marketing business. Your brand is not your product. Your brand is not your store. Your brand is not your cleaning business or, your brand is your calling, right? And your calling is your brand. And there is absolutely a connection between where you've been and who you've become because of it, what God has formed in you, and how that translates to not just your calling, but the movement you're creating, who you are helping, right? The woman that you are going to now put your hand out to and take on that journey of leadership, growth, um, identity, all of it, right? So it's not about becoming someone new. It's about finally seeing the woman that God has been faithfully forming all along. Okay? We don't create authority. It's revealed, it's recognized, and again, once you begin to see it, you can't unsee it. Okay, so these are some ladies that I've worked with. Sarah, she said, I stopped waiting to feel qualified and finally began sharing what he'd entrusted in me. Margaret is a friend of mine from Australia. My hardest seasons weren't random. They were preparing me to serve the woman walking the same road, which is what I'm getting at there, right? Nothing is random, okay? Susan, I stopped trying to build someone else's business and started stewarding my own calling. I really like this because, Susan had struggles like a lot of women do. There are so many options in front of us all the time in the business world. There's so many platforms, strategies, options, and it can really make you crazy. It can be overwhelming. And as I've watched this happen over and over again, it's not because these women suddenly became more gifted or because they discovered some secret hidden talent or, before God, because God gave them something that they didn't have before. They simply began seeing their lives through a different lens. And instead of seeing, again, disconnected chapters, they began seeing a story. Instead of pain, they began seeing something that they were being prepared for. Um, or they began seeing the authority that God had already formed. Okay? So that's the common thread here. None of these women became someone new. They just started recognizing who God was forming all along. Okay? Um, I had the privilege of walking alongside these women. They all had different stories, different backgrounds, different experiences, but one thing they had in common was they all reached a moment where they stopped asking, do I have anything to offer? Or what should I do? Or what business should I build? And they started recognizing what God has been preparing them for all along. And that's really the moment where everything starts to change. Because recognizing your authority isn't the destination, it's the beginning, right? Once you recognize what God has formed in you, the next question becomes, how do I faithfully steward it? How do I put language around it? Who am I actually called to serve? How do I communicate my story in a way that points people to Christ instead of myself? And how do I build something that honors God with what He's entrusted me? These are the questions I couldn't answer on my own, right? Or these are the questions that I knew these women were having. And it's the reason why I created um, something called the Authority Room. So once these women started to recognize the authority he'd been faithfully forming in them, everything changed. And, I didn't create the Authority Room to, you know, help women become something they're not, but to help them recognize, embrace, and faithfully steward the authority that we've been talking about. So, what is the thing you've been calling confusion, right? What if that is actually God inviting you to see your life differently? What if you don't need to reinvent yourself? We hear this word all the time, midlife reinvention. I used to say it. What if you simply needed to recognize what He's been preparing you all along? Because how you answer that question determines what happens next. Okay, so I want to leave you with a kind of final thought before I tell you about the Authority Room, because I don't believe information changes our lives. It doesn't. Okay, decisions change our lives. Decisions help us move in the right direction. Decisions are movement. And that's one thing that God has been saying to me a lot is move, 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 move. And we already know that God does not always, give us the entire game plan, right? Every woman eventually reaches a crossroads. Maybe that's why you're here today. Something shifted. God has been stirring something in your heart, and you're not who you were 10 years ago, but you're also not completely sure of who you're becoming either. And that can feel really uncomfortable because we live in a world that tells us every feeling of uncertainty means we need another surface level strategy. Ain't that the truth? Feeling uncertain, buy this course. Don't know which direction, or feeling like, you're not ready, get another certification. Business not working, change your niche, right? Reinvent yourself. But what if that's not what this season is asking of you? What if this season isn't asking you to become someone new? What if it's inviting you to finally recognize the woman God has already been forming? Okay, so the keep waiting option is exhausting. The saying yes option is freeing. Because I don't believe most women in midlife have an information problem. They have a recognition problem. They've spent decades faithfully living their lives, raising children, building careers, serving families, starting businesses, walking through heartbreak, growing in wisdom, and they look at all that and say, none of it counts because I don't have the right strategy. I don't believe that's how God works. I have come to believe that God redeems everything we willingly place in his hands. And all of it, he has allowed you to walk through it so he can use it. But there comes a moment when you have to stop waiting for someone else to tell you who you are, and you have to decide whether you're whether you'll keep looking outside yourself or for permission, or whether you're finally going to trust what God's been preparing for you. And that doesn't mean you'll have every answer. No, it doesn't mean you'll never feel afraid. I do still. It doesn't mean you'll never question yourself. You are human. But it does mean that you stop measuring your future by what you don't know and start measuring it by what God has already done. And so for me, when I stopped asking, which business should I build, and started asking, God, what have you been preparing me for? Everything changed. Not overnight, not directionally, but I stopped chasing and I started stewarding. I stopped trying to reinvent myself and started building from authority. And that's really, honestly, what I want for all of you. Okay, not just another business or another income stream, but the confidence to faithfully steward something that is meaningful for you, your calling. Okay, because there are women, there are women waiting for the version of you. She's out there. She's waiting for the version of you that stops hiding behind uncertainty. She's waiting for the woman who finally believes that her story has value, that her experience matters, that her voice carries weight, that God really can use ordinary lives for extraordinary kingdom purposes. And so the question isn't whether God is still calling women in midlife. I believe he is. The question is, will you say yes? Will you trust the years behind you weren't wasted? Will you believe that your life has been in preparation, not disqualification? And midlife isn't the end of your story. It may just be the chapter of where everything starts to become clear. Okay? So before I tell you the next step, I want to acknowledge something. Okay? Whether God invites us into something new, our minds have a way of filling with questions. So maybe you're thinking, what if I'm not ready? What if I'm too late? What if I don't know enough? What if I fail? What if I invest and nothing changes? Okay. So these aren't signs that you're making the wrong decision. They're often the very fears that keep you stuck for years, and you'll wait until you feel completely ready. And then, you'll be waiting forever. Okay. And so what if fear doesn't get to decide? Okay, I'm not ready. You don't have to feel ready to take a faithful step. Okay, God doesn't, expect that. That's not how he works. I'm too late. Okay, your years are preparation, not disqualification, right? You're never too late. In fact, you probably, with everything we have under our belts as midlife women, we are right on time. I don't know enough. You already carry the authority. I've just showed you that. You need help recognizing and stewarding it now. What if I fail? You won't be building alone. Okay, in the authority room, you'll have coaching, accountability, community, all of it. And what if nothing changes? Waiting guarantees nothing changes. Okay, doing nothing guarantees that nothing changes. Supported action creates the possibility of transformation, and that's the truth. So you don't need to become somebody else, right? So here's what I know. You don't need another cert. You don't need to become somebody else. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need a place where your calling can be nurtured. Okay? Doesn't that feel good? I love that. Your confidence strengthened, your message clarified, and your faithful next steps supported. Because we all ask the question, why and how, right? How do I do this? How do I build this? How do I create something that I know is my calling and just doesn't feel like just another thing? Okay. And so I want to welcome you to something very special. I think it's the most special thing I've ever done in all of my years of building business. It's called the Authority Room. Build what you've been given. where women in midlife faithfully steward their God-given authority and build meaningful, profitable businesses that create kingdom impact. Okay? And it's not another course, it's not another program you'll buy and never finish. It's a mentorship and community designed to walk beside you as you transform the authority God has already formed into a business that serves others and honors Him. Okay, and it's already inside of you. Because recognition is only the beginning, right? Recognizing what He's given you through your lived experience. This is where we learn how to steward, and this is where the transformation happens. Okay, so what is inside this community? Okay, everything you need to move from uncertainty to confident, faithful action. Okay, so your commissioning journey, a clear, faith-filled roadmap, so you can stop piecing everything together alone. Okay, this is really important. This is one of the biggest challenges and struggles that I see in the online space right now, with people trying to build funnels and should I do email? Should I do text marketing? What about landing pages? And how does it all fit together? Okay. Stewardship sessions. So this is where we tackle implementation, accountability, and support, right? I want to help you move, right? We're gonna actually move, and we're gonna be accountable to each other. Messaging and visibility coaching, right? This is really, really important. You have to be visible, okay? I wrote down a quote earlier today. What did I say? Visibility without authority is exhausting. And that is the truth. Visibility without authority is exhausting because it doesn't feel right to you to be visible with something that is not your God-given calling, okay? Monthly live training and coaching, so fresh direction every month, so your inspiration becomes continued growth. Authority audits, this is really cool. You'll get strategic feedback so that you can make confident decisions instead of second guessing. Okay, it's cold out there in the online space without this kind of direction. Community of commissioned women, so prayer, encouragement, and women who understand the season you're building in. Okay, and those authority audits, you're going to receive ongoing strategic feedback on your messaging. Okay, so that your business and everything that you do around it, you're making confident decisions. Okay? Now, because you're joining at the beginning, and I'm going to be talking in 2 minutes about when this is actually happening, I have some bonuses, right, for founding members. So you are a founding member of what will become a very powerful movement. And the first bonus is preferred founding member pricing. So when you join, you will lock in founding member and the investment that you pay for as long as you remain an active member. So prices will never change for you for as long as this community is together, because people raise prices. It happens, and we should raise prices because the cost of living goes up and everything else. But yours won't as a founding member. So this is kind of cool, the Unshakable Truth Journal. So this is a journal, quick backstory, that I created with my best friend Natalie, who you met earlier. And it's a guided 90-day journal to silence the enemy. And it is an incredible resource for faith-fueled midlife women. We've gotten some amazing feedback on this journal, and it's actually a charitable effort for our local church here in Chatham. You'll get a copy of the journal and access to all of what we have for our journal, our journal people. Bonus number 3, as a founding member, you'll get a private session with me to clarify your message and map your faithful steps. And I always put this in as a bonus because having a one-on-one session can be really, really valuable with somebody. and it just helps you get to the front of the line faster. And that's the best way I can put it. Not that we're in a race or we're in a lineup, but it just helps you take a big step because I am working with you one on one to really nail down what it is that your message is going to be. Who are you serving, and what that looks like. Okay, so the recommended path that I really feel is like the sweet spot for women coming into this is the 6 month stewardship commitment. And I'm going to tell you to choose this entry point, not because it's the most expensive, it's not, not because I want you to spend more, but because I want you to give yourself the greatest opportunity to experience the transformation you've been paying for. Okay? And because I've learned from years of doing this that you don't build meaningful, profitable businesses in 30 days. You don't. You really don't. You don't build them 30 day to 30 day to 30 day. Okay? You don't find your voice in 30 days. You don't develop the confidence to show up consistently in 30 days. And you don't learn to faithfully steward a calling in 30 days. Okay? You build one faithful step at a time. And one conversation at a time, one message, one act of obedience, one decision to show up again. And that's why I believe 6 months really is the sweet spot. So it's long enough to move beyond you just feeling inspired, okay, and you moving into and actually experiencing transformation. Long enough to stop consuming and start creating, long enough to stop questioning your authority and really start leading from it, and long enough to build rhythms instead of relying on motivation, right? That's a big step, because motivation is fleeting, right? When we actually have a transformation and we start to steward, that actually stays. That's leadership. Excuse me. So if you're ready to stop circling, and if you're ready to stop, collecting notebooks full of ideas, and you're ready to stop wondering if you've missed your moment, then this is the path I recommend. Okay. The stewardship commitment it's 6 months inside the authority room. Your investment is $21.97. And it really is going to create a wave of women who I'm so excited to see what God is doing and God will do in the lives of these women in 6 months. And so again, it gives you 6 months to move. Okay. Now there will be women listening today who already know that this isn't just a 6 month decision, right? Because you've really spent time wondering, preparing, praying, and you've reached this place where you're like, I'm all in. And what God is building in you just isn't a quick project, it's a calling. Okay. And if that is you, then we have the commissioned year option, right? So 6 months to move beyond and into transformation. Okay. And this gives you, obviously it's a better deal. Okay. In terms of your money spent. It's 12 months inside of the authority room. You get access to everything. You will have access to preferred pricing on anything else that I do. And then this $500 growth credit is pretty cool. And so you can use that towards any sort of future coaching. So maybe when we come into the authority room, we're going to be talking about things like building out the back end architecture and infrastructure of your calling, right? Because your calling isn't just words on a page, it's you transforming lives, but we need to set up the infrastructure to do that. Okay, and something very special happens when we do that. And so that $500 growth credit, that's just an example of what you can use that for. And something powerful happens when you make a decision, before your emotions have a chance to kind of negotiate your way out of it, right? And this is really for the woman who really knows that she's ready to go all in, right? And you're ready to make that kind of decision. You're ready to create the space to focus on growth. instead of constantly questioning whether you should continue. And that is 3597. Okay. So, again, the $500 growth credit comes with your annual purchase. You can use it towards future premium experiences, strategy intensive, VIP opportunities, coaching, as I said, working on funnels. This is really for the woman who probably is at that point where she can see that, by the end of 365 days, that she really wants to be at a particular income level. Maybe you're looking at, being a six-figure earner in whatever your business is, or, maybe you want to write a book or start a podcast. Maybe that's your thing, and you really can see, what you can do, and what you can do by committing to, a whole year, because you know how fast a year goes by, right? So that's your $500 growth credit. Now, maybe, you're thinking, I know I need this, but I just can't commit to the 6 months or the 12 months. And that's fine. Maybe today that's what you're thinking, but that's okay, because God doesn't ask us to have the whole journey figured out. He simply asks us to take the next faithful step. And that's why I've created this monthly membership, right? So you'll still receive access to the authority room, live training. You can begin where you are, grow at your own pace, and continue as long as this season serves you. Okay, and sometimes the most courageous thing you can do isn't making the biggest commitment. Okay, maybe it's just saying yes to the next step that God's inviting you to take. Okay, so there are your options. Now, just a note, um, before we finish, is the authority room officially opens its doors in September. Okay. Yes. Oops. Silly thing. We officially opened September 14th. And I planned it this way intentionally because I know many of us are in summer rhythm. We've got family holidays, different schedules. I want us to begin this journey together so we can give it the attention it deserves. So, if today's masterclass, resonated with you, I don't want you to lose the momentum. If God is stirring something in your heart, I would love to hear from you. So I want you to send me a message. I will have a wait list, VIP wait list for anyone wanting to join as a founding member to the Authority Room. I can answer questions, pray with you, help you discern if the Authority Room is for you. And so today, I really want you to think about all that we've talked about. My prayer is that today becomes your yes. Not because you have every answer, not because you suddenly feel fearless, or because you've come to trust the one that's calling you. So if God has been stirring something in your heart today, if you've recognized yourself in this message, if you've realized that He has been preparing you all along, then I don't want you to leave this moment unchanged. Okay? Whatever the next faithful step is for you, I would love to have you inside the Authority Room. I'd be honored to walk this journey with you, because the world doesn't need another woman hiding her story. Okay, the world needs more women who are willing to faithfully steward the authority God has entrusted to them. And the woman you're becoming is waiting on the decision you're about to make. And so I'd love to see you in the Authority Room. Please reach out to me. You can email me. You'll be getting follow-up emails after this masterclass. And let's step into who God is calling you to be.